Jason Schreier's lying career is over. And the only sad part about that is the fact that he had one to begin with. I will remind everyone that this is the guy who was there at the beginning of Anita Sarkeesian and Zoe Quinn supporting and amplifying their message and ideologies. He is 100% responsible to a very huge degree to the current situation that is in the games industry. He has been working to subvert and destroy the things we love literally for decades at this point. So the fact that his career is now taking an absolute pounding, I call that karma.
Hello, it's One Take Schreier, and the outrage merchants are at it.
Merchants! He said it! Holy!
Again, today's claim is that the allegations of sexual harassment at Blizzard are false and that somehow I made them all up. If you're lucky enough to not be familiar with this world, there are a number of culture warriors out there who tweet all day about various agreements, whether or not they are true, in an attempt to elicit intense emotional reactions from their viewers.
That's right. Don't believe what your eyes are showing. Believe what I tell you. That is better.
These people aren't reporters. They don't actually talk to anyone involved or ask questions.
Oh, they're not You're not a reporter. Oh my god.
They just kind of tweet and post videos, but they do have reach and sometimes bring in large audiences. This is part of a whole ecosystem that just rewards and leads to people getting paid for spreading misinformation on the internet. And normally I just kind of ignore this part of the internet, like in the same way that you would ignore someone in Times Square screaming that.
You know, I'm gonna give a hot take before we go into this, because yesterday I talked about this. This is gonna be a good one, so please finish, wait 1 minute until I finish, okay? The allegations at Blizzard, all are probably true. But two things can be right at the same time. California can be a state that literally doesn't care about people. They want to just push their agenda. And Blizzard can be a shitty company at the same time. I mean, logically speaking, every big company is gonna fight and sue everyone involved if accusations like this get levied against them. We have never seen a big company not do this unless they were not 100% guilty. And Blizzard chose to just stay silent and pretend nothing's happening and then settle and pay a fine. They did not want this heat. And the reality is, a lot of people are asking currently, well, if they did all of this, then why isn't anyone in jail? Because none of these things get you in jail. They're literally money fines. None of these, the cubic crawls, even the self-deletion that is reported by the police and is 100% real. You can find it. You can find the certificates and whatnot for it. None of that can be proven that that's actually Blizzard responsible for it. Sure, they're going to get fines for being a bad company, but at the end of the day, no one's going to jail, and this is all about money. The reason that Jason Schreier is getting so much heat for this is not because he levied these allegations against Blizzard, it's because he made it sound like everyone at Blizzard is going to go to jail. He made this whole thing absolutely massive, even though it's honestly not as bad as he made it out to be. This is why people are mad. Blizzard did do all of these things. I mean, do you honestly think nothing wrong happened in a company that self-admitted to have a rock star culture? Let's be real. But he wanted to be the hero, and now he's getting something in return.
The world is coming to an end because of gays in the military. But actually,
What?
today I did want to address it because I think this is a good opportunity to talk about a very serious, very important issue and try to explain it in a way that captures the nuances and complexities of it all. And unlike those
Nuance and complexities, which means he is not going to show any proof. Which, by the way, I kind of expect him to not show, because he's gonna get sued if he shares any names or whatnot.
squealing cretins. I actually spend most of my time as a reporter on the day on the phone. Well, I spend all day on the phone with people who are involved in these stories, asking them questions, trying to corroborate their accounts with other people so I can piece together what actually happened. And so today's video that I'm going to talk about is based on two main sources. One is an article that I published in Bloomberg in August 2021 that I'll link in the show notes. And the other is my book, Play Nice, about the history of Blizzard, published in October of 2024. Fun fact, the same outrage merchants who are now claiming that I destroyed Blizzard by making up sexual harassment claims.
Also, by the way, he didn't destroy Blizzard. A lot of people are also angry at him because they kind of blame him for being responsible to what happened with Blizzard and how everything's turning out. He's not responsible. Blizzard was long, long dead before Schreier said a single word about it. Bobby was the only thing that kept Blizzard together, and Bobby was gone anyway.
I've actually spent the last 5 years or so claiming that I kept quiet about sexual harassment claims, just to kind of give you a look at the type of intellect that we're dealing with here. But let's zoom out, because I do think this is.
Wait, isn't that completely true? Didn't he himself actually say that he knew about this stuff when it first got released to the public for years? I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I heard that he actually said that he knew this about this for years and chose to do nothing. I could be wrong on this, but I think that was a part of it.
Really worth talking about. So in 2021, July of 2021, the California government sued Activision Blizzard for sexual harassment and misconduct. It was a big, explosive lawsuit. A lot of the claims, most of the claims really focused on Blizzard, the maker of Warcraft and Overwatch and Diablo and StarCraft. This lawsuit included a lot of salacious details, some of which I subsequently reported were false, but we'll get to that. And it led to these massive effects for Blizzard and Activision as a whole. It led to protests and walkouts, eventually the sale of Activision Blizzard to Microsoft. One thing, by the way, I won't be talking about is the allegation in the lawsuit that a woman committed suicide as a result of harassment against her, because it is very complicated, very tricky. It involves Activision, not Blizzard. It was a woman within Activision, not within Blizzard Entertainment. And there's been a lot of kind of details surrounding that story that are very hazy and hard to prove. It's very difficult to prove why someone killed themselves, or to be able to say that definitively. Her parents, the parents of the woman who killed herself, actually filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Activision Blizzard, and
Yeah, needless to say, that's not going anywhere. Again, you can claim it was a pot, but you can never prove that someone was actually responsible. But the details around this case are pretty bad.
and took it back, withdrew it. It's really messy. It's not something I'm going to get into because I don't have all of the facts surrounding it. Because in that case, I wasn't able to talk to the victim involved because unfortunately she has passed away. She has died by suicide. I'm going to focus on the stuff that I can prove and corroborate and the people that I've actually talked to. So, okay. 2 years after this lawsuit started, by the Activision Blizzard had become part of Microsoft, in December of 2023, California and Activision settled for $54 million. This was after the Microsoft deal had closed, so no longer run by the same people, different kind of entity, and that settlement was likely a whole part of that. And many of the women who worked for Activision Blizzard at various and during time periods that were kind of included in the lawsuit got checks as a result of that, sometimes significant checks in the 5 figures. And the language of the settlement, including the following, I'm going to read this entire thing. Quote, no court or any independent investigation has substantiated any allegations that there has been systemic or widespread sexual harassment at Activision Blizzard, that Activision Blizzard senior executives ignored, condoned, or tolerated a culture of systemic harassment, retaliation, or discrimination, or that Activision Blizzard's board of directors, including its chief executive officer, Robert Kotick, acted improperly with regard to the handling of any instances of workplace misconduct. So that language is at the core of this week's outrage merchant argument that the whole thing was bullshit. This happened 3 years ago, but I guess the culture warriors only discovered it now, which again shows you the kind of intellect we're dealing with here. But look, I'm not going to talk about them anymore. I'm going to talk about
I love how he constantly tries to belittle and attack everyone who is against them. If you're against me, you're an idiot. Yeah, I'm sure that's gonna end very well for you. Oh, People who did not follow something like this every day only are mad now. What? That is just slimy, honestly.
The truth of what actually happened at Blizzard, because despite the language in this settlement, there were a lot of women who spoke out about their experiences, and I can share some of their stories. So first of all, by the way, there were actually two lawsuits.
Wait, is he gonna actually share the story? I absolutely do not believe that he's gonna say anything.
A state lawsuit and a federal lawsuit, and this settlement was only for one of them, the state one. The federal lawsuit was settled for $18 million and did not have the same language, did not say anything like that, like the California did. There's actually one of the reasons this is so also messy is that the state investigators and federal investigators got into political squabbles, and there's a whole lot of details involving Gavin Newsom and accusations about him interfering in this that I'm not going to get into here, but
He probably did. Let's be real, he probably did.
if you're interested in the legal drama, there's a little bit more there that you can find online here and there, and parts of that have still not been quite told. That story still isn't 100% clear of how all that went down, but I think that might help explain why there's still a couple of questions surrounding the lawsuits of it all. But let's put that aside. Let's look at all that.
Okay, 1/4 of the video is gone, as you can see, and he has not given a single amount a single bit of evidence that anything he said was actually true. But he has said a lot of sentences that belittle the people watching this and call us idiots and dumb and whatnot. I wondered, is this some kind of magical tactic, maybe? Interesting.
Actual facts. And I think one thing that's really important here, if you've watched my other videos, you know this, but oftentimes when you try to reduce a story to a binary of like, is it true? Is it not true? Especially a story that's as complicated as allegations of widespread harassment and a culture of
Actually, you can distill everything down to yes or no. That's how lawsuits are settled. Okay, this is why we have that. This is why we have lawsuits in the first place, because we can almost distill literally anything down to a yes or no, judging on the facts.
misconduct and sexual discrimination that really does a disservice to a reality. Reality is more nuanced and more complicated than that, because actually two things in this case are simultaneously true. One is that the California lawsuit was misleading and full of inaccuracies. You can write anything in a lawsuit here in the United States, and that one had a lot of things wrong. The other thing that's true is that many of the women who have worked for Blizzard over the last few decades have felt mistreated by the company. And I think that it's important to note that
Now, granted, I do not believe anyone who says I feel mistreated. No, don't give me that BS. Don't do that. That's called emotional manipulation. I don't want that. I'm not gonna believe a single word you say if you do that.
harassment is one thing. I think any company that reaches a certain size that gets into the thousands or tens of thousands is going to have incidents of harassment. It's really how the company chooses to deal with that harassment and the harassers themselves that creates a culture. So back in 2021, California lawsuit dropped. I did what any reporter would do. I started making phone calls. Before this, I'd heard a few details, a few anecdotes here and there, but not enough to actually be able to publish a substantial story, which one day down the road, I'll do a video about how I make stories and what you kind of need, the threshold of proof that you need to actually
Yes, we care so much, Jason. I mean, I cannot wait to know how you make up the shit you make.
be able to do a story, but it wasn't enough at that point. So now the floodgates were open. People were open to sharing their experiences. People were going on social media talking about their experiences. At the time for this Bloomberg story that I published, I spoke to about 50 current and former employees. And the reality, of course, was nuanced. I mean, for starters, Blizzard was a massive organization with thousands of employees and dozens of divisions, and your experiences there would be drastically different depending on where you worked and who you worked with. The Overwatch team had a different culture than the Diablo team, and nothing was quite like the battle.
Well, yeah, we know how Overwatch is. Oh my god, Overwatch is disgusting.
Net team. I'll get to that. And of course, Blizzard in the 1990s was very different than Blizzard in modern times. If you want to read about the old days,
Okay, 1/3 of the video is gone, and still not a single sentence of the actual truth, what's happening. We're gonna start skipping because again, people are saying that he says nothing to prove, which, I kind of doubted at first because there's no way he doesn't say anything, right? But at this point, yeah, it's just gonna be calling people who don't believe him idiots, and that's it.
Is a lot of that's a very common theme. This is a place where they had some of the best times of their lives. For stories like this, the people involved want to stay anonymous, and many of them did. But a person she worked with looked at her and said, quote, her ass looks great in those shorts.
Big if true.
And as a result of that, she never wore shorts into the office again. She
Lamau.
told me about various times where she
Yeah, okay, listen. If 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 that's your bod for bad things, then I mean you probably should go get some professional treatment help.
complained about things to HR, and nothing was ever done about it. I spoke to Connie Griffith, who told me that in executive meetings, when she was an executive assistant at the time, she would hear some of the top men at the company complaining about hiring women, saying, if we hire these women, we got to be more careful around them. Broderick, and many of the other.
That sounds smart. Always be careful. There is, by the way, this thing where a lot of companies that have been there's been literally so many reports at this point that men who are managers and whatnot literally refuse to be one on one in a room with a woman because they're afraid of allegations, which is crazy. And that could actually be that.
Other women who worked for Blizzard told me they compared their salaries to male colleagues and found that they were paid less even when they had the same or
Based.
even more experiences.
It's disingenuous anytime that someone says, but my work experience is the same. We're talking about merit, sunshine. I don't care. I don't care if you worked in this company for 20 years. You see, Phil, he's autistic. We're nice people here. Okay? He's special needs. He can barely count the potato. He can barely count to two. And he's better at the job than you. That's why he gets a salary. And that he chooses to be paid in Monster Energy drinks. But he is still paid more than you for a reason, Becky. That's because you're shit at your job. Yeah, many cases.
In fact, Roderick's husband actually wound up like leapfrogging her at the company. They both worked for Blizzard and wound up making more over.
That's probably because he was better at the job.
His time there, despite the fact that she had more experience at Blizzard than he did. 6 different women for the Bloomberg story, and even more later on, told me about incidents where they were harassed by men. They went to HR, reported those incidents, and HR did nothing. Even
I don't care about someone saying, oh, this happened, that happened. Name what happened. Tell me what happened, not like, oh, Tim looked at me funny. Well, maybe Tim's ugly and that's why you didn't like it. Let's be real, probably Tim's ugly and that's why you didn't like it, okay? If Chad looked at you, you would be ready. Okay, everyone knows.
There's a little bit of nuance because sometimes HR might actually take disciplinary actions against men, but not tell the people who reported it. That itself is kind of a problem, but there are ethical and legal complications there. Regardless, those women came away feeling like nothing had been done. They still had to see some of those same men every day. Sometimes it was their bosses, sometimes it was people who were above them. It contributed to this feeling.
Okay, yeah, so in court, this is all kind of hearsay. Everything that Schreier's reporting and saying is hearsay, technically. So, I mean, he can literally make up stuff at this point. Is this gonna be it? Is this his proof?
Overall, hazing rituals that people had to go through felt like a frat house. People would take
the frat house thing is real.
Shots during meetings and vomit in trash cans. I swear to God, I heard all sorts of.
That's called a fun day.
Crazy stories about these hazing rituals that people had to go through. Alcohol was such a big problem at Blizzard and overall, but especially in the BattleNet department, that the company actually temporarily banned drinking at holiday parties at one point, and then later said it was instituting a 2-drink minimum at these parties because people would just kept getting drunk and causing problems and driving drunk.
He means maximum, not minimum, but that is hilarious. A true 2-drink minimum. Oh, that's good.
And alcohol was just everywhere. It was a real problem. Ben Kilgore, who ran the tech department, in fact, he was the chief technology officer. In fact, he was being lined up as the successor to Mike Morhaime, the CEO of the company. He was going to be the next CEO of the company, was then fired in 2018 after an investigation into his behavior and allegations surrounding him sleeping with subordinates. He was actually fired for lying to the investigators, according to
Based.
people who know what happened or familiar with the investigation. The lawsuit, I think it actually missed a lot of important parts of Blizzard's culture that I've explored in my reporting, like the lack of boundaries between professional and personal lives at Blizzard. One,
Yeah, so there's no real evidence. Dude, he could have actually started with this, but instead he spent literally 8 minutes calling everyone watching this and not believing him stupid and dumb and whatnot. Jesus. Well, it's very impressive. Anyway, that was Jason Schreier. Let's hope his career is over. Have a nice day. Bye.